This is Lucifer, buddy. Here we go. 20, 40, 80, 100, 150. So there's 200, 220, 240. Keeps coming to it. 261.25.
Parker Schnabel just changed gold mining forever. And he didn't do it with a bigger excavator or a faster wash plant. He did it with a radar unit that sees through the ground before a single machine moves. Right now, somewhere in the Yukon, Parker is looking at a screen that shows him exactly where a buried river has been hiding gold for 12,000 years. Gold nobody has ever touched, sitting in a channel nobody has ever seen. No digging, no guessing. No burning $50,000 on a dead zone. Just a signal, a map, and a decision. Every miner who came before him worked blind.
I know a fair bit about this piece of property here, and it's kind of been one of the biggest spots left in the Klondike for a long time. There's been a lot of people come in, try and make it work, and some have had success and some haven't.
Parker isn't blind anymore. And what that means for gold mining, not just his operation, but the entire industry, is something nobody saw coming. What the radar is actually doing. Parker runs one of the most aggressive placer operations in the Klondike. Every season he's burning through diesel, moving over burden, running his wash plant around the clock, all chasing a pay streak he can't see. For generations, that's the deal every gold miner accepts. You dig, you hope, you find out. But ground-penetrating radar changes that deal completely. It lets Parker see what's underneath before a single machine moves. And in an industry where a wrong call costs tens of thousands of dollars in a single week,
this will act just like a zipper. If this gets caught on anything, it'll just rip the belt right open. We're gonna need to get Alec down here, get Liam down here, everybody we can, get this thing fixed up as fast as possible.
That's not a small edge. That's everything. Here's the short version of how ground-penetrating radar works. The unit sends pulses of electromagnetic energy straight down into the earth. When those pulses hit a boundary between two different materials, say, loose gravel sitting on top of solid bedrock, part of that signal bounces back. A receiver captures it. A computer turns those return signals into a cross-sectional image of what's underground. Think of it like an ultrasound for the Earth. What makes this so powerful in the Yukon specifically is permafrost. The frozen, relatively dry overburden that covers much of the Klondike is actually ideal for GPR. Dry, ground lets the signal travel deeper and return cleaner. In wetter, clay-heavy soils, the signal degrades fast. But in Parker's territory, conditions regularly allow penetration of 15 to 30 feet. That's deep enough to find exactly what he's looking for. And what he's looking for is buried rivers. The gold that's been sitting there for 12,000 years. Gold is heavy, that's the whole story. Its specific gravity is 19.3 grams per cubic centimeter, roughly 7 times denser than the quartz gravel around it. When water moves gold, it can only carry it so far. Eventually, gravity wins. The gold drops. It settles into the lowest points, into bedrock cracks, into the inside bends of rivers where current slows and the water loses energy.
We knew that there was going to be quite an extensive amount of kind of effort that we had to put in to find out whether or not this place was worth mining. And we've seen gold in the pan, and it's enough to get us to the next stage.
Those concentrated deposits are called pay streaks, and they follow the path of old water flow, not random luck. Here's the problem. Rivers move. Over thousands of years, they shift course. They get buried under landslides, glacial, deposits, decades of sediment. A river that was running gold-rich gravel across what is now a hillside in the Klondike is gone from the surface, invisible. The creek that exists today might be running 50 yards from where the ancient channel cut, at a completely different elevation. From the surface, you'd never know. But the gold that settled into the ancient riverbed is still down there, locked in gravel that last saw moving water 12,000 years ago. Geologists call those buried waterways paleo-channels. They are the single most valuable target in Yukon placer mining, and they are invisible to everything except a drill or a radar. Parker's radar can see those paleo-channels from the surface. It can show him the shape of the buried valley, where the bedrock sits deepest, where the heaviest materials, including gold, would have settled over centuries of water flow. That changes the game entirely. Before the machines, start Parker's pre-dig system. Parker Schnabel didn't build one of the most successful placer operations in the Klondike by being lucky. He built it by doing more homework than the competition before a single machine fires up. Ground-penetrating radar is the newest layer in a system he's been refining for years. And it only makes sense when you see what it's built on top of. Start with the historical records. The Klondike has been mined since the 1890s, and that history is documented. Old production logs, geological surveys, claim records from outfits that worked these creeks a century ago. Parker reads all of it. He's been direct about this in interviews. Understanding where previous miners dug, what they pulled, and what they left behind is some of the most valuable preseason work he does. The old-timers were good. They had instincts developed over decades in the field, but they were working with hand tools and horse-drawn equipment. They had no way to chase a paleo-channel 30 feet under a ridge. Parker does. What those old records actually show him is a map of what was findable with 1930s or 1950s technology, which is a very different thing from a map of what's in the ground. A production log that shows a crew worked a bench claim in 1947, pulled modest numbers, and moved on might look like evidence of poor ground. But Parker reads it differently. The crew in 1947 was working the surface expression of the deposit. If the geology suggests a buried paleo-channel running below that bench, they may have been sitting on top of a much richer zone and never known it. The historical record tells him what was found.
I might be interested in having a look at your ground. So Liam's drilling.
Yeah.
I'll be interested to see how Liam does with the sonic rig.
Well, I'll share that with you if you want to take a more serious look at it.
The radar tells him what wasn't. Next comes geochemical sampling. Before any heavy equipment moves onto new ground, his team is already out there pulling soil samples across a grid. The lab results come back showing trace gold concentrations across the area. Gold doesn't stay perfectly locked in one spot over thousands of years. Microscopic particles migrate slightly as the surrounding material weathers. A consistent pattern of trace gold across a zone tells Parker there's likely something richer beneath it. It's not proof, but it's a signal strong enough to point the radar at. This step matters more than it sounds. Soil sampling across a large claim area costs relatively little compared to moving equipment. It takes time and field labor, but it generates a heat map of where gold is present at any detectable concentration. When Parker overlays that heat map onto what the historical records suggest about the old drainage pattern, and then runs GPR over the zones that show up on both, he's not guessing. He's working from 3 independent lines of evidence, all pointing at the same target. Then comes the GPR survey itself. Parker is out on that four-wheeler, or walking the claim with the unit, running survey lines across the ground, the historical records and soil samples flagged as interesting. The radar profile comes up on the screen, layer by layer, depth by depth. He's looking for the shape of bedrock, where it dips low, where it rises, where it shows the characteristic U-shape of an old channel cut. If the profile shows a buried valley running through the claim, and the soil samples showed elevated trace gold above it, and the old records show a creek that used to run through this area before a landslide buried it.
We don't really know much about it. If the gold's not there, you get in real trouble real fast. So this is like a map with the drill results. Sonic results, Australia Creek.
That's a convergence. That's where Parker points his excavators. The survey lines matter too. Parker isn't running 1 or 2 transects across a claim and calling it done. A proper GPR survey of a target zone means running parallel lines close enough together that you can build a 3-dimensional picture of the subsurface. The spacing depends on the depth of the target and the complexity of the geology. In straightforward ground, lines every 10 to 15 feet might give enough resolution. In more complex terrain, you go tighter. The result is a volumetric model, not just there's something down. But the channel runs in this direction, at this depth, with this width, and the deepest part of the bedrock is here. That's the information that makes the next step, drilling, work. And then, even with all of that, he still drills. Test holes go into the ground at the intervals the radar profile suggested. Those holes pull actual material. Parker's crew processes it, measures the gold content in ounces per cubic yard, and that number tells him what the season on this ground is actually worth. Technology doesn't replace the drilling, it makes the drilling smarter. Instead of scattering 30 test holes across a claim, hoping to find the pay streak, Parker puts 12 holes exactly where the data says to look. The hit rate goes up, the waste goes down. That's the system. Historical records tell him where to look. Soil samples confirm the signal. GPR maps what's underground. Drilling confirms the grade. Each step narrows the uncertainty. Each step makes the next one more precise. And by the time Parker commits his full crew and equipment to a piece of ground, he's already eliminated most of the ways a season can go wrong. What a wrong week costs, and what a right one returns. The economics of placer mining are brutal when things go wrong and extraordinary when they go right. Parker runs large equipment, excavators, bulldozers, a wash plant that needs to keep running. Fuel alone on a Klondike operation, his size can run thousands of dollars a day. Add equipment hours, crew wages, and the short Yukon season, typically 16 to 20 weeks of real production. And the cost of burning a week on bad ground is severe. 1 week of full operations on a dead zone, ground with no pay streak or a pay too thin to cover costs, can eat $50,000 with nothing to show for it. Stack 2 or 3 of those weeks together, and it doesn't matter how well the rest of the season goes. The math doesn't recover. Now flip it. Gold, flip. In 2024, traded above $2,300 per ounce. Levels the industry hadn't seen before.
Gold price.
Yeah.
I don't even like to talk about it or look at it.
Me neither, because it should be illegal. That's how high it is, isn't it?
Parker's operation at its peak has moved enough material to pull well over 1,000 ounces in a season. At those prices, finding the right ground isn't just good mining. It's the difference between a season worth $2 million and a season worth $4 million. The radar doesn't add a few percent efficiency to the operation. Used correctly, it can redirect an entire season's output toward ground that actually pays. That's the economic argument for GPR in one sentence. It costs a fraction of what one bad week costs, and it dramatically reduces the number of bad weeks. There's another dimension to this that doesn't get talked about enough. In the Klondike, equipment positioning matters enormously. Moving a large excavator from one part of a claim to another, or breaking down a wash plant operation to shift ground, isn't a 2-hour job. It's a logistical commitment. Every repositioning costs time, and time, in a 16-week season, is worth more than almost anything else. When Parker makes a call on where to start digging, and it's the wrong call, the cost isn't just the fuel burned on bad dirt. It's the time lost repositioning, the momentum broken, and the compounding pressure on the weeks remaining in the season. GPR attacks that problem directly. When Parker surveys a new piece of ground before committing his equipment to it, he's not just finding out where the gold might be, he's finding out where it isn't. That negative information, this part of the claim, has no buried channel. The bedrock here is too shallow for a pay streak to have formed. This section was scoured clean by a different geological event, is just as valuable as the positive signal. It tells Parker where not to put his machines. And in a short Yukon season, knowing where not to dig is half the battle. What the radar can't do. Here's the part that matters for credibility, because this technology gets overstated constantly. And overstating it does Parker, and the viewer, no favors. Ground-penetrating radar cannot see gold. Full stop. Gold is a metal, but its electrical properties don't stand out from surrounding gravel in a way that registers as a distinct GPR signal. The radar shows Parker structure, bedrock depth, layer boundaries, channel geometry. It shows him where an old river ran. It shows him where the deepest bedrock pockets are. It shows him where an ancient valley cut through the landscape thousands of years ago. It does not show him a pay streak. It shows him where a pay streak is most likely to exist. That distinction is everything. The radar is a probability tool, not a treasure map. It narrows the search from 100 possible dig sites to 5 or 6 high-confidence targets. Then Parker's experience, his historical research, his soil sample data, and his test holes do the rest of the work. Every single layer of his system still matters. GPR doesn't make those layers obsolete. It makes them more targeted, more efficient, more likely to converge on the right answer. But it cannot stand alone. Depth is also a real constraint, and one that doesn't get discussed honestly enough. In wetter or clay-heavy ground, the GPR signal degrades dramatically within the first few feet. The frozen permafrost conditions that make Parker's Yukon territory favorable for deep radar penetration don't exist everywhere in the Klondike.
This is all the new drilling that we did up top here.
Mm-hmm.
And this is all the old historic drilling that we mapped in the same program. Green is good, red is bad. Traffic light system.
After a wet season, with active layer thaw pushing deeper into the permafrost, the same ground that gave clean profiles in a dry year can attenuate the signal heavily. Parker knows this. Any serious operator using GPR accounts for seasonal and site-specific variability in what the radar can and can't show. Cost is the third constraint. GPR equipment, the software to process and interpret the profile data, and the experienced personnel to read it correctly represent a real capital investment. A geophysical contractor running a proper survey of a large claim area doesn't come cheap. For a small one-man operation or a single-claim family outfit, those costs probably don't pencil out relative to the potential return. This technology justifies itself at Parker's scale, where the potential return on a correctly targeted season is measured in millions. But it's not a universal solution for every miner in the Klondike. The radar doesn't find gold. It finds the places gold is most likely hiding. Used correctly by an operator with the resources and the system to act on what it shows, it is extraordinarily powerful. Misunderstood as a gold detector or a guaranteed shortcut, it's an expensive disappointment. Parker understands the difference. That's why it works for him. The ground. The old-timers couldn't reach. The Klondike Gold Rush of 1898 brought tens of thousands of miners into the Yukon in one of the most intense prospecting campaigns in history. They were good. They found a staggering amount. Of gold, the Klondike produced roughly 12 million ounces in the decade after the rush, an output that still stands as one of the most remarkable in placer mining history. And they worked the ground they could work. The creek beds, the exposed benches, the accessible placer, deposits they could reach with the technology of their era. What they couldn't reach was anything buried deep. A paleo-channel sitting under 30 feet of glacial overburden on a hillside that showed no surface gold wasn't findable with hand tools and basic drilling rigs. You couldn't see it. You couldn't drill it economically across enough ground to confirm it. It got walked over. It got staked, tested shallowly, and abandoned when the surface ground didn't pay enough to justify continued work. The claim records from that era are full of ground that was dismissed as marginal or worked briefly and released. Some of that ground was genuinely poor, but some of it was sitting on top of something. A buried channel, a deep paleo deposit, a concentration of gold that settled into an ancient riverbed centuries before the first prospectors set foot in the territory, that the technology of the time couldn't locate. Every generation of miners since 1898 has reworked the Klondike with better equipment. The gold dredges of the early 20th century moved volumes of material that hand mining couldn't touch. The bulldozers and excavators of the post-war era pushed the accessible ground even harder. By the time Parker Schnabel's grandfather was mining Porcupine Creek, the industry had already been through this region multiple times. And still, every generation was essentially limited to what they could see from the surface or confirm with physical drilling. Parker is the first generation with a tool that lets him see through the surface. That's not a small thing. That's a fundamental change in what's findable. And in a region as historically mined as the Klondike, new findable ground is exactly what the industry needs.
We're moving our yard and our camp over to Dominion. Well, we've spent $15 million for the ground. I have no landlord. I can do it however I want, and life standing.
What virgin ground actually means. In gold mining, virgin ground isn't a poetic phrase. It's a specific and financially meaningful term. It means ground where the gold hasn't been disturbed, hasn't been partially recovered, hasn't been skimmed by a previous operation that caught the top of the pay streak and left. The full deposit, the complete concentration, is still sitting where geology put it. In a region as heavily mined as the Klondike, finding genuine virgin ground on surface deposits is nearly impossible. Those claims are gone. They got worked in 1900, reworked in 1940, and reworked again in 1980. What's left on the surface is either low-grade or exhausted, But the deep paleo-channels are different. A buried river channel that's been sitting under 25 feet of overburden since the last glacial maximum has never been touched. Nobody found it because nobody could see it. If Parker's radar shows him an unmined paleo-channel on a claim where the surface was worked over and abandoned, and the test holes confirm it's carrying real gold, what he's looking at is not a marginal play. He's looking at a full, undisturbed deposit in one of the richest gold-producing regions on Earth. The math on a virgin deep channel is completely different from the math on reworked surface ground. When a previous operation has already run through a bench or creek bed, what's left is what they missed, the fines that washed through their recovery system, the corners that weren't worth moving the plant for, the thin zones between richer pay streaks. You can make money on that material, but you're working the margins. A virgin deep channel hasn't been through anyone's recovery system. It hasn't been partially depleted. If the grade is there, the entire deposit is there. For Parker's operation, a single confirmed deep channel could represent more recoverable gold than 2 or 3 surface claims combined. That's why the search matters. That's why Parker is out there with the radar before the machines move. The surface of the Klondike has been picked over for 120 years. The future of serious placer mining in this region is underground, in the buried valleys and ancient riverbeds that the old-timers couldn't see, and that every subsequent generation walked over without knowing what was beneath their boots. The decision Parker is making right now. Here's where the authenticity of this story matters. Parker Schnabel is a real operator running a real business in the Yukon. What's documented publicly about his approach, through Gold Rush, through interviews, through publicly available statements, is that he takes exploration and ground selection seriously, that he uses historical data extensively, and that he's consistently invested in better equipment and better methods when the return justified it. Whether Parker is using GPR right now in the specific way this video describes, strapping a radar unit to a four-wheeler, running survey lines across a new claim this season, is a question the public record doesn't fully answer in precise detail. What is documented is that GPR is a real, commercially available technology that is being adopted by serious placer operators across the Yukon and Alaska right now. Equipment suppliers like Sensors and Software and GSSI sell systems specifically configured for mining exploration. Geophysical consultants who specialize in placer mine evaluation are actively running GPR surveys for operations in the region. This is not theoretical. It is happening across the industry. What's consistent with everything Parker has said publicly about how he selects and evaluates ground is that a technology like GPR fits his methodology exactly. He has talked openly about the importance of doing the research before the dig, about understanding the geology of a claim before committing equipment to it, about learning from historical production data to figure out what was missed rather than just where it was found.
All right, send me results as you can, and I'm gonna start looking at equipment and kind of seeing what the place is worth from a non-ground standpoint, and then you and I can have a chat in maybe a few days once you have some answers.
All right, leave it with me. We'll see what we can find.
Okay, all right, thanks, dude.
GPR is the next logical step in that system. An operator with his resources, his sophistication, and his stated approach to exploration is exactly who this technology was built for. He is the kind of operator who uses it, or who will, and probably already does, in ways the show doesn't fully document. So, understand this clearly. The story isn't that Parker invented something proprietary. GPR has been around for decades. The story is that the best placer miners are now incorporating it into a multi-step system that dramatically improves ground selection. And Parker Schnabel's documented approach to mining puts him at the leading edge of that shift. The technology is real, the economics are real, the opportunity is real, and the operator whose name is on this video is exactly the kind of miner positioned to capitalize on all three. What happens next? The radar has shown Parker where the old river ran. The soil samples confirmed elevated trace gold above the zone. The test holes came back with numbers worth committing to. The excavators are moving. Everything Parker does from this point on is still mining. Still physical, still expensive, still dependent on weather and equipment and the 1,000 things that can go wrong in a Yukon season. The radar didn't guarantee him anything. It gave him a far better starting point than any miner in the Klondike had access to 20 years ago. His grandfather mined the same ground with experience and instinct and a lot of hope. Parker mines it with all of that, plus a data set. The instincts didn't go anywhere. The decades of accumulated knowledge about how this land holds gold, that's still the foundation. What GPR does is extend his vision underground before the dig starts, and let those instincts work on better information than any previous generation of miners ever had. The question every Gold Rush viewer wants answered is simple. Does Parker's GPR call pay off? Does the buried channel actually carry the gold the radar suggested? Does the season on this ground return the investment? Or does the Yukon prove that even the best technology still can't outrun a bad draw? That answer comes out of the ground. But here's what we know going in. Parker's not guessing. He's not hoping. He's working from the most complete picture of what's underground that any miner in this region has ever had access to. And at $2,300 an ounce, if that buried channel delivers what the data suggests, it could be the most valuable ground call he's made in his career. The Klondike has been hiding some of its gold for 12,000 years. The radar just found it. Every single miner who ever walked this land before Parker worked with only what they could see from the surface. He's working with what no one has ever been able to see, until now. Whether you're betting on Parker or betting against the technology, one thing is absolutely certain: gold mining will never look quite the same way again. That's a season worth watching closely. Subscribe now and don't miss what happens next.